Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone filling up the chat. My name is Julia, and I'm joined with my friend Anna. And today we will be talking about the book called Right-Wing Women by Andrea Dworkin. So Dworkin, she recently died. Well, not recently, but she died in 2005 at the age of 58, which is quite young. Her writing started in 1974 with the publication of Woman Hating. Her most popular books are Pornography and Intercourse. And so this book, Right-Wing Women, is in the middle of those.
My turn?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really not nervous at all, but I guess that's no problem. About the book, yeah, Julia already said it's from '83. And basically the book is divided into 6 chapters, and each chapter could stand like an essay of each own. So we divided the chapters, and Julia is going to speak about half of the chapters. I'm going to speak about the other half. We'll see how much time for discussion is left at the end. It was a bit difficult to concentrate everything. The chapters are usually a very in-depth description of the condition of women in patriarchy, and then only at the end of the chapters she explains how this relates to right-wing women. So when we talk about the book, don't get frustrated, what does it have to do with right-wing women, because it kind of happens. So it's always a description first, so then the perspective of right-wing women can be understood. Yeah, it's so the chapters are 6. The first is about the promise of the ultra-right, then about the politics of intelligence, then about abortion, then about the views about Jews and homosexuality, then about coming gyocide, and then about anti-feminism and how that links into all of this. And Julia is going to start with the first chapter, and then I'm going to take over.
Fantastic. Thank you. Before I begin, I'd just like to say one important thing. This book is written about women in the US right. So the theory could perhaps be applied to women on the right in other countries, but please keep in mind that this book is specifically for and in reference to the women on the right wing of the United States. Okay. So chapter 1. The promise of the ultra-right. This chapter answers the question, why are women on the right? Dworkin offers a kind of thought process or a reasoning for right-wing women, and she also gives a list of 5 promises that the right makes in order to gain women. So the chapter starts out with this kind of statement that women are, in essence, conservative. What does that mean? Well, Dworkin says it is generally true that women adhere to the traditions and the values of their social context, whatever that context might be. She says this is generally true. She offers a male point of view for why this is, and then she offers a feminist point of view. So the male point of view, men say women have children because women by definition have children. And this is a biological explanation for why women follow the rules. Men say it is a fact of life that women have children, and women have the instinctual obligation to nurture and protect those children. So in order to protect their children, women are socially, politically, economically, and sexually conservative. They accept the status quo because the status quo is safer than change, whatever the change might be. So that's the male point of view. Now, the feminists say, hold on, that biological explanation of the conservative nature of women, this obscures the realities of women's actual lived lives. It is true that we in general, follow the rules, because any rebellion against the men around us is dangerous. That's the whole point. We conform in order to survive, in order to be as safe as we can be. Dworkin says the right-wing woman will prove that she is loyal and obedient in the service of men around her, in the hopes that they will not hurt her. But we, in general, we know that men rarely hold up their side of this bargain. But most women cannot afford to acknowledge this fact. Most women cannot afford to recognize, and this is a little bit funny, they cannot afford to recognize that whatever burnt offerings of obedience they bring to beg for protection will not appease the angry little gods around them. And I just love this image that Dworkin provides of angry little gods running around a woman, demanding that she does what they say. Dworkin then talks a little bit about mothers. She says, mothers, in the interest of survival, they raise their daughters to conform. Mothers are the immediate enforcers of male will. Most girls resent their mothers and the particular set of males that their mothers are allied with. So girls choose to run with a different set of males, to be allied with a different set of males. But men in all camps use force and threat to demand that women accept abuse in silence. Men deny women a complexity of life and personality. And then men ridicule women for having small lives. The resources of women are astonishingly meager, Dworkin says, because we have been deprived of the means to organize and expand our resources. So women, in order to defend ourselves from the humiliation or the ridicule, we defend the men around us. Women, in order to defend themselves, defend the men around them, the people who control their lives. A woman's loyalty to men means that she is loyal to her own destruction. And men of all ideological persuasions define womanhood exactly this way, loyalty to her own destruction. When I was reading this part, a song came to my mind, the song called Violet by the band Hole. And the lyrics go on, take everything, I want you to go on, take everything, I dare you to. And it's a complete loss of self. The woman recognizes that she has no sense of self aside or outside from the men around her, and she's angry about it, reasonably so. Women desperately try to be perfect. They try to embody a feminine ideal imposed upon them by men who want to use them up. Perfection, as men define it for women, turns a woman into a function. This conformity to male standards is hostile to freedom and integrity. However, female survival is promised only in this conformity and nowhere else. Dworkin says, subservient to male will, women believe that subservience itself is the meaning of a female life. Women know the world is a scary place, and women are afraid that male violence is uncontrollable or unpredictable. If women unconditionally submit to men, the right promises to provide for women these 5 things. So here are the 5 promises of the right. I'll go through them and then I'll explain them. Form, shelter, safety, rules, and love. Okay, so number 1, form. The right promises to give the life of a woman shape and meaning with a predetermined order, social, biological, sexual order. Number 2, shelter. The right promises to protect the home and the woman's place in it as the wife, as the mother. Number 3, safety. If a woman is obedient, she will not be harmed in general. Number 4, rules. In order for women to obey, they first need to know what the rules are. But the right promises that men will also follow a set of rules. So, for example, if a woman submits to her husband, which is the rule for the woman, then the husband will not harm her, and that's the rule for the man. Finally, number 5 is love. The right promises a concept of love as a reward for fulfilling female functions, which would be sexual submission and reproduction. This means that the man is responsible for the material well-being, the emotional well-being of the woman. In the USA, on the right, there is also the USA in the, the right in the USA also offers Jesus. Jesus is a man to whom women can submit without threat of sexual or psychological abuse. So Dworkin says, the right in the United States today is a social and political movement controlled almost totally by men, built largely on the fear and ignorance of women. The quality of this fear and the pervasiveness of this ignorance are consequences of male sexual domination over women. Every accommodation that women make is rooted in the urgent need to survive somehow on male terms. So, in consideration of all of this, women are angry, but women take their rage and contempt for the men who actually do hurt them and project it somewhere else, somewhere unknown. Dworkin says, when a person is disoriented, when a woman's rage is displaced, she is easily controlled and manipulated. So right-wing women are scared and they're angry, and reasonably so, but they do not have the courage to rebel. So they require symbols of danger that justify their fear. And the right provides these symbols of danger by designating clearly defined groups of outsiders as those sources of danger. So that's chapter 1.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about chapter 2, which is called The Politics of Intelligence. Just to make clear, if I use any strong words, it's because I'm part quoting what she says. So the second chapter deals with the question of how men hate intelligence in women, and how women are prevented from developing different kinds of intelligence. So under patriarchal rule, intelligence is seen as a function of masculinity. So in women, intelligence is starved and isolated, she says, because intelligence has nothing to do with what a woman is, because women are only defined by their sex organs that they must put to use, and intellect or the brain is not a sex organ, so it's not relevant in women. Intelligence distinguishes men from animal, but it does not distinguish woman from animal, because the animal functions are her meaning. The women's work is done below the waist. Intelligence is higher. Women are lower, men are higher. The first kind of intelligence she talks about is literacy, which is throughout history and globally denied to girls. Sex roles are used to keep girls from becoming literate by saying there's nothing out in the world for you when you read books. All you really need is a husband that will provide for you. Once she is literate and she can read, the kind of books she reads will be influenced by femininity, because reading the wrong books also make a woman unfeminine. And if she starts writing, the language that she can use will be restricted by patriarchal language. So for example, if she starts writing, it will be difficult for her to write about her body because words are just missing. So women are actively kept from becoming literate, and the interest is steered into a more feminine direction. So they will read like romance novels and not science books, for example. The second kind of intelligence is intellect, which for her is a combination of literacy and intelligence. It's the mastery of ideas, which is a skill that needs to be cultivated and which does not develop in a private world of isolation. When women have intellect, it's seen by other men as a privilege. It shows that she has been raised above her kind, above her sex, due to the kindness of some men who helped her develop this. Women are actively prevented from displaying it. Women of intellect are seen as ugly, and the pleasure in cultivating the mind is seen as a sexual perversion in women. So due to female isolation, it's much harder to develop this kind of intelligence in women. The display of intellect is ridiculed, and women are attacked if they display it. The next kind of intelligence that is crippled in women is creative intelligence. She says creative intelligence takes action in the world. It demands to know and understand, and it wants to accomplish something. So it's a kind of intelligence that wants recognition, that wants influence and power. So it needs to receive feedback and respect in order to be nourished and sustained, and otherwise it just dies. It's obviously writing, composing, painting, inventing, generally the search for knowledge. Women are constantly and systematically denied the needed recognition and respect when they show creative intelligence, unless this creative intelligence serves male interests. So to stay a woman, women must denounce it, keep it timid and restrained. Moral intelligence is another form of intelligence that she talks about. For her, it's an intelligence that constructs values. Then those values are exercised in the world, and those values have consequences in the real world. So moral intelligence must act in public, not in private, and it demands an endless ability to exercise, to make decisions. It tangles with the questions of right and wrong. Not to be confused with it, she says, is moralism, because moralism is mainly like a set of rules that are learned, women are trained to follow them, and the rules are used to keep women locked in. So when you look at all of this together, you know that the women's place is not the world. The women's place is the house, is the private sphere. So her ability to make moral decisions that actually have consequences in the world is almost zero. So all she's left with is moralism, the rules that she learned from men. The last intelligence she talks about, and then she has a whole thing in the chapter only about this, is sexual intelligence. She says she thinks this kind of intelligence exists, and it asserts itself through sexual integrity. So it is rooted in the honest possession of one's own body, and it tangles with questions of dominance and submission. Sexual intelligence is forbidden to women, and it cannot flourish in a person whose purpose is to be exploited through sex, which is the state of all women under patriarchal rule, where the woman's body is not her own. But all freedom, she says, begins with physical self-possession. So sexual intelligence in women, she sees as a revolutionary intelligence, as a kind of intelligence that women will be punished for having, for wanting to have. So what are women left with when all forms of intelligence are basically denied and ridiculed in women? She thinks to survive, a woman must keep her intelligence timid and small. We must hide it. So we are only left with a survival intelligence. So any kind of intelligence that assists us in surviving. So she goes on to say that the natural intelligence of women manifests in surviving. It expresses itself in ways it expresses itself in finding ways to endure, find meaning in the unendurable, and simply endure being used because of one's own sex. To sum it up, for what it means for right-wing women, I decided to read parts of the book so that you also get a feeling of how she writes. She says, right-wing women have surveyed the world. They find it a dangerous place. They see that work subjects them to more danger from more men. It increases the risk of sexual exploitation. They see that creativity and originality in their kind are ridiculed. They see women thrown out of the circle of male civilization for having ideas, plans, visions, ambitions. They see that traditional marriage means selling to one man, not to hundreds, the better deal. They see that the streets are cold and that the women on them, so in prostitution, are tired, sick, and bruised. They see that the money they can earn will not make them independent of men, and that they will still have to play the sex game of their kind at home and at work too. They see that intelligence displayed in a woman is a flaw, that intelligence realized in a woman is a crime. They see the world they live in, and they are not wrong. They use sex and babies to stay valuable because they need a home, food, and clothing. They use the traditional intelligence of the female, animal, not human. They do what they have to survive. I can take off.
All right. So thank you. Chapter 3 is called Abortion. Dworkin answers the question of why do women need abortion? And her answer is because of forced sex. She says women live in a context of forced sex. Even if an individual woman has never experienced coercion, even if individual women personally like intercourse as a form of intimacy, even if women forbid it. She says, excuse me, Dworkin says the right wing forces women into sex by law through marriage. She says the left wing forces women into sex by manipulation. So by promising ideologies that look liberatory. So ideologies that promise liberation. Dworkin says it is impossible to identify male force or female consent in marriage because forced intercourse in marriage is the norm and it is sanctioned by the church and the state. So in the United States, before the year 1973, abortion was a crime and birth control was illegal in many of the states. The average woman who wanted and got an illegal abortion was married and already had children. These were not women from the streets. They were women from homes. They were the good and respectable women of America. But they did not talk about their abortions. First of all, they were illegal. Secondly, abortion was a crime against motherhood. And third, because the men around them viewed abortion as murder. So to many men, each aborted pregnancy is the killing of a son, and he is the son killed. Men think of pregnancy and abortion primarily in terms of themselves. Men say, I was once a fertilized egg, therefore, to abort a fertilized egg is to kill me. So women don't talk about their abortions because they are afraid of the hysteria of men who are confronted with the idea that men are not needed. Oh, wow, imagine that. The idea that women don't need men in the way that men need women. The adult male, even as a fertilized egg, one cell has the right of occupation with respect to her. He has the right to be inside her and the rightful power to change her body for his sake. Women hate to remember the illegal abortions that they survived because their husbands experienced none of this, none of the pain, the vulnerability, the fear of death. Women keep quiet precisely because they had married sex. Their husbands impregnated them. In marriage, a man has the sexual right to his wife. In marriage, a woman, the wife, has no right to refuse her husband intercourse. And the law forced the woman to bear any child that might result. Through intercourse, Dworkin says, men express and maintain their power and dominance over women. This is sanctioned by the state using religious dogma from the church embodied in the patriarchal family. The right of men to sexually access women's bodies, Dworkin says, is the heart, soul, and balls of male supremacy, whatever style of advocacy is used, right or left. The woman who says no to her husband, whatever her reasons, also says no to the state, no to God, no to the power of all men over her, that power being both personal and institutional. You see how it takes a lot of courage for women to say no. She then talks about the sexual revolution that took place in the 1960s. So the sexual revolution promised women freedom outside the home, outside of marriage, but sexual radicalism was defined in classically male terms. So number of partners, frequency of sex, varieties of sex, group sex, for example, and eagerness to engage in sex. The practice of sexual liberation did not result in the sexual utopia as advertised, at least not for women. So in the sexual revolution, if a woman said no to sex for any reason, it was a sign of sexual repression, a lack of sexual freedom. But women had a concrete reason for saying no, and that was the fear of pregnancy. Pregnancy kept men from sexually accessing women en masse. So abortion became a high priority political issue for men in the 1960s. The left was male dominated and militant on the issue. They believed abortion would make women absolutely accessible, absolutely free. Women realized that they had been sexually used. Women who had been radical in counterculture terms became radical in a new way. They became feminists. How does this relate to right-wing women? Well, right-wing women are loud in their protests against abortion. They learned from what they saw in the 1960s, a massive social movement to secure sexual access to all women on male terms. They have seen that the left only champions women for its own benefit. After the summer of love came the summer of single mothers. In the view of the right-wing woman, pregnancy is the only consequence of sex that makes men accountable to women for what men do to women. So if pregnancy is no longer an inevitable consequence of intercourse, a woman is deprived of her strongest reason not to have intercourse. Opposition to birth control is based on this same principle. So right-wing women know how men play the game. They know that men do not have principles or political agendas not congruent with the sex that they want. The right-wing woman makes what she considers to be the best deal. She has to be married to just one man and be sexually accessible only to him, not to all of his buddies too, so that he will pay for the kids. She can live in his house on his wages, as long as she smiles and obeys his every command. Okay, you can take over, Anna.
Well, I would, but it's your turn again.
That's right. Yes, it is still my turn. Thank you. I will go into chapter 4. Thank you. Chapter 4 is called Jews and Homosexuals. Okay, so in this chapter, Dworkin explains the religious dogma that the right uses to designate a group of outsiders to hate, to project anger onto. The chapter opens up with a scene from the National Women's Conference that took place in 1977 in Houston, Texas. Dworkin was there working as a reporter. And she talks about a man who's standing outside of the convention center. He's a preacher and he's preaching the word of God. And he says, lesbianism is an abomination in women. He says, a strong and righteous nation depends on fulfilling God's will. And God's will is that wives obey their husbands. So it follows that lesbians go against God's will. Dworkin says, in patriarchal history, one passion is necessarily fundamental and unchanging, and that is the hatred of women. She says, racism is a continuous passion, but the race or races abused change over the face of the earth and over time. In the United States, the country was built on the hatred of Black people. Western Europe hates Jewish people. In societies where homosexuality is hated, fear of homosexuality is a terrifically powerful tool in the social manipulation and control of men. Men are pitted against each other in the futile quest for unimpeachable masculinity, she says. In a tribal society controlled by men, sexual rivalry among men meant trouble. It meant war. So in the Bible, we see that there were laws that regulated male sexuality to ensure that men wouldn't fight each other. Male sexuality is controlled in the interests of male dominance. This is essential when the authority is exclusively male. So in the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament, there's an example of this. If you were a man, incest with your sister did not cause the same male-to-male conflict as, let's say, intercourse with your daughter-in-law, so the wife of your son, or with the wife of your father, which would be your mother or one of your father's multiple wives. So it didn't matter what women do sexually, it only matters what men do sexually as a conquest of what a man owns. So all of these prohibitions on male sexuality contributed to the stability of male power. The power of men depends on social harmony, which is at risk. Dworkin says, the social harmony that the power of men depends on is at risk by the kind of sexual lust male dominance produces, the lust for forced sex. Directing that lust toward women and trying to regulate which women made the lust produced by male dominance work on behalf of male dominance, not against it. It is essential to male power to protect men from the sexual lust of other men. So fast forward to the New Testament, in the book of Romans. Paul, the apostle who supposedly wrote this book, he introduces a new sex hatred, the hatred of homosexuality. He says homosexuals are unnatural, worthy of death. And then he blames the Jews for the existence of homosexuality. So he says it was the social tolerance of the Jews for homosexuality in private that proved the corruption of Jewish law. This tolerance lacked masculinity. So the Jewish people are accused of killing Jesus, and killing is a masculine act. So what Paul does is he links the Jews and the homosexuals together, specifically Jews and lesbians. And in this way, the Jewish men are deemed less masculine, more feminine, more like women, more like subordinates. Anti-Semitism takes away the masculinity of Jewish men. There's something written in there saying that not only are the men having sex with each other, they are also unmanly enough to leave the women alone. So Dworkin continues by saying, okay, for real, in at least 2 genocides of indescribable cruelty, both Jews and homosexuals were searched for, found, and killed, the Inquisition and the Holocaust. And I will quote her now. 2/3 of the world's Jewish population was exterminated, and this castrated the people as a whole rather effectively. And she says, quote, "Nothing threatens the Jewish male now more than a perception of him as being deficient in masculinity." Dworkin says, "For this reason, Israel is a militarist nation. No one will ever again accuse the Jews of being soft." Okay, so she says, in the end, Jewish men join up with the Christian right because they want domination over women and children, which is the social program of the right. And because they want to be the opposite of homosexual, whatever that might be. So how does this relate to right-wing women? Well, right-wing women hate Jews and homosexuals because, firstly, the men around them are anti-Semites and homophobes. And these women want to adhere to the social context around them. A second reason is Jewish people are accused of killing Jesus, who is the man right-wing women can love unconditionally. And third, the Jews are associated with homosexuals in the Bible. So it goes against God's will. And using their rage is displaced towards this designated group of people. There's good reason for women to adhere to religious dogma. And within this frame of male domination, there's also good reason for women to hate homosexuality. The only dignity and value that women get is as mothers. Having children is the one social contribution credited to women. It's the bedrock of women's social worth. But homosexuality, both lesbianism and gay male homosexuality, negate women's reproductive value to men. So homosexuality means that the one thing women can do and be valued for will no longer be dependable as that bedrock of women's worth. And without being valuable to men for the purpose of reproduction or intercourse, women have nothing. Dworkin says men have one reason for keeping women alive, and that is to bear babies. And she asks a very interesting question here. She says, quote, "If women are not needed to run the country or write the books or make the music or to farm, engineer, dig coal, to fix plumbing or cure the sick or play basketball, what are women needed for? If the absence of women from all of these areas, from all areas, is not perceived as a loss, as emptiness or poverty, what are women for?" Okay, I'll give it over to you, Anna.
Yes, so she continues this train of thought in chapter 5, which is called The Coming Gyocide, where she deals with the question of how little female lives are worth outside of reproduction and sex, and what happens if the government is allowed to regulate the uterus. So the value of a female life is determined by its reproductive value. So what happens when that value changes in the system as a woman you live in? So which females in the States are wanted for reproduction? Wanted for reproduction are usually white, middle class, and young women. So what happens to women that are not white? What happens to women that are not middle class? What happens to women that are old? She goes into this very much, but to sum up, you could say, okay, if you're not white, you're probably going to push to sterilization, as it happens and happened to Black women. If you're poor and on welfare, you're going to be punished by the state for having more children so that you don't have more children. And when you're old, so 70% in the US nursing homes are women. When you're old, they're going to keep you away. They're going to keep you drugged. They're going to abuse you. in horrible conditions, and they will keep you away from society so that the young women don't see what's in store for them. And for the poor women and the Black women, it's important that, for example, a country like the United States, a capitalist country, needs like a working force for the really shitty jobs. So the poor women and the Black women, they need to reproduce for patriarchy, for capitalism, so that there's a kind of workforce for the shitty jobs, but not more. So she says, whatever her race or class, however much she is privileged or hated for both, a woman is reducible to your uterus. And that goes back to the other chapter about intelligence. Since the female mind is feared or not noticed or ignored, women who are maybe the white middle class young women housewives who do not perform their feminine role at home can be drugged at a large scale. So in the US at that time, more than twice the drugs men get for the same problems women receive. So women receive twice as much drugs for the same problems. We're talking about tranquilizers, sedatives, amphetamines, all means of controlling women. So it is totally okay in patriarchy to keep women calm, numb, and asleep, because her work, her domestic work, sex work, reproductive work, sex work not in prostitution, but you know what I mean, does not require to be alert. It does not require to be vital or independent. So no one misses the energy and the mind of women in patriarchy, because all we are good for is reproduction if we're supposed to reproduce. Otherwise, it's even worse. So she raises the question, what happens to women under patriarchal rule when life can be made in a laboratory? What happens to women when reproduction, the only capacity that women have that men really need, is no longer the exclusive province of the class of women? So in order to understand what could happen, she tries to explain two different models of how women are used in patriarchy right now. She says one way to use women is the brothel model, and the other way to use women is the farming model. So in the brothel model, narrowly defined, women are collected together for the purpose of sex with men. So it's basically women in narrowly defined prostitution. The women's function is explicitly non-reproductive or even anti-reproductive, because a woman in prostitution is not supposed to reproduce. What is produced is sex, and the women in it are interchangeable. This model is held up to all women as a warning, because this is what happens when you take the wrong turn. The other model is what she calls the farming model. It's the model of motherhood, where women as a class are planted with the male seed and are harvested. So women's function is the fruit they bear, it's reproduction. Women are cow, land, chattel, and this model is incorporated in the male-headed marriage. Babies are produced and the women are not interchangeable. So this is the best chance for her to be actually seen and meant and to get some tenderness and compassion. Why? Because since she is his, so he owns her, her state will reflect back on him. So he has to keep his woman in a good shape. And also, since this farming is like a lot of years, there will be some kind of personal relationship developing. But the farming model requires a constant application of force, incentive, and reward, and it needs a lot of luck because you don't know what the reproductive qualities of the women are. Therefore, to not miss a chance, men have imposed this model on all women who are not in prostitution, and there are social and economic sanctions in place to punish women who try to live outside of the farming model, so spinsters, lesbians. So for now, the best way for men as a class to control reproduction is to keep all women who are not in prostitution reproducing under the explicit domination of a husband. But what is happening now is that men are starting to apply the brothel model to reproduction so that reproduction will be the kind of commodity that sex is now. So for example, in the surrogate motherhood, you see the brothel model applied to reproduction, where the part of the woman's body that is bought is the womb, and it's bought for reproduction. So women's function is reproductive, babies are produced, but the women are interchangeable. And so there are a lot of examples of how the industry starts to be more independent of the women's reproductive organs, skills, I don't know. So, but she says the issue is not the technology itself, it's the question of how this will be used in a system where women are sexual and reproductive commodities already. So, she says for the future, Dworkin predicts that in the face of advancing reproductive technology, more women will seek protection as women in religious ideologies that formally honor the sanctity of motherhood. So women, she says, will try to use male ideology and religious tradition wherever and however it sanctifies the mother giving birth, so that women will not become less necessary than they already are. So she says, basically, when the men in science can make babies on their own, women will turn to the men in religion to defend their necessity as mothers, which is the core of their worth in a patriarchal society. And in that future, she says, the women not needed for reproduction will have no claim to signal dignity and civil protection. So then the only choice women have is to submit or die. On that note, well, we have 10 more minutes. Yesterday I needed 20 for this. We'll see how that works. So we might not be, maybe we won't finish, maybe there will probably not be any room for discussion, but you can discuss it yourself.
There's a breakout room that women can go to after this, so maybe they can discuss this. Yeah.
So chapter 6 for me is the most important chapter. It's the most comprehensive. She does like a big turn. She talks about what is anti-feminism, what is feminism, what's the women's condition, how pervasive is anti-feminism, and how unchangeable does this make patriarchy seem to women, which is then the link to right-wing women. So I'll just skip the part of what anti-feminism is, because you probably all know, but what I found interesting was that she says anti-feminism is articulated through 3 social models: the separate but equal model, the women superior model, and the male dominant model. And they all mix and match with perfect ease. In the separate but equal model, women and men are destined by biology for different spheres. So the woman is in the home, she's intuitive, emotional, tender, and charming, and her work is domestic labor, while the man's place is the world, and he's logical, reasoning, and strong and powerful, and his labor is in the world, according to his social class. So you have those 2 spheres, they are equal, so the men say, but they're separate. So women do not need to feel their inferiority because the spheres are just separate, but they're basically equal. So women are only inferior if they try to invade the male sphere, which they shouldn't. That's what the model is for, to tell them that they shouldn't. So if she wants to be equal, she needs to stay in her sphere. I guess we all know this. The woman superior model has 2 versions, 2 brilliant versions. The first version is the spiritual version, and the other version is the sexual version. The spiritual woman superior model is a model where she is worshipped. And she is worshipped because she is good by nature. She floats and she gravitates towards what is pure and tasteful. and she has an instinctive knowledge of what is good and right. This model is very prominent in religion, but also in the environmentalist and the anti-militarist movements. But it is based on a presumed and necessary chastity of women. So this model is used to justify all the uses that the fallen women are put to. So basically all drama in female lives replicates the biblical fall, where she loses her innocence and chastity. But since the woman is innocent and pure in her core, she must not know the world. And therefore she's unfit for real responsibilities. This model is really mean because it's used to show that actually men do worship women and adore them. But it's not true, because what men are worshiping is not women, it's a symbol that they worship. So in order to stay worshipped, the woman must remain a symbol. She cannot become human. She cannot become human with flaws, and she cannot become a moral agent. It's the seductive version of anti-feminism that women on all political spectrums fall for. So because it says that the female by biological, by nature, is morally good, which is nice in a society where women are hated. The sexual version of this model is purely pornographic. It's a model that says that her power is in her capacity to provoke erection or lust in men. So the logic is that she provokes what she wants, so then she gets what she wants. And by that, she has power over men. So power over men in this model is something intrinsically female and defined beyond reason. She says it's as if power is in the corpse that draws the vultures. This model is fundamental to the anti-feminism of the sexual liberation movement and the legal system with regards to sexual crimes, because his desires give her power. She wants it, he responds. So in his use of her will is implicit. It's the power of women in pornographic sex. And it's a kind of power, when it's defined like this, that many women will reject. The third model, and the most common, is the male dominant model. It's virtually everywhere. She says, religion and biology are the great roots of the metaphysical idea that men are superior to women because they are. It's used to justify hostility towards women. And the genius lies in the reframing of this hostility for what passes for love, conquering, invading, beating, tyrannizing, mass terrorization in form of rape. So the male is dominant, and because he's dominant, she must submit. Because he's dominant, she needs a protector. There's nothing you can do about it. And when she looks for a protector, it shows that the model is true. How much time do I have? So then feminism, she says, to have integrity needs the firm, unsentimental, continuous recognition that women are a class having a common condition. What's that common condition? Women under patriarchal rule are subordinate to men, are sexually colonized in a sexual system of dominance and submission, are denied rights on the basis of sex, are historically chattel, are generally considered biologically inferior and confined to sex and reproduction. She says, this is the social environment in which all women live, all women. And the environment is created by crimes against women. It's created by 4 crimes that she says are rape, battery, economic exploitation, and reproductive exploitation. And she says there is no state of being or act of will, including lesbianism, that changes the circle of those crimes. There's no state of being or act of will that protects a woman from the basic crimes against women as women, or any woman outside the possibility of suffering these crimes. Great wealth does not put a woman outside the circle of crimes, neither does racial supremacy in a racist social system, or a good job, or a terrific heterosexual relationship. The circle of crimes is also not changed by how one feels about it. You can decide to ignore it. It doesn't matter. It is there and it applies. So anti-feminism operates whenever a group is ready to sacrifice any group of women to any two of the models. So how can we understand the minds of right-wing women? She says they see the sex oppression, they see the system, but they believe that it's unchangeable. To them, it's unchangeable. So they go to marriage because they think that it will protect them from rape. They are okay with being kept at home because they think it protects them from economic exploitation in the marketplace. They're okay with being for reproduction because this is what gives them value and respect. So they want to increase the value that reproduction has. They go to religious law-abiding marriage because they think it will protect them from battery because a wife is supposed to be cherished. But the logic has a flaw because the home is in fact the most dangerous place for a woman. It is where she's most likely to be murdered, raped, and beaten and robbed of her value. So what right-wing women do to survive will not mean that they will survive. So who is at the end responsible for women being on the right wing? She says that more than anything else, it is the anti-feminism that convinces right-wing women that the system is immovable, unbreachable, and inevitable. But she says it's not specifically the anti-feminism of the right that keeps the allegiance of those women. It is the anti-feminism that saturates political discourse all along the political spectrum. The anti-feminism of the left, right, and center fixes the power the right has over women. It gives a huge majority of women over to the right, over to social conservatism, economic conservatism, religious conservatism, over to obedience. So when right-wing women see feminists, they see women, they see powerlessness, and they see a movement that might jeopardize the bargains, the power they made. So why should the powerless put their trust and faith into the powerless? And we must be honest. If you face the true nature of the sex class system, Dworkin says we can only accommodate or destroy. But honestly, it's a question she raises, and it's a question that I will use to end this talk. Can a political movement rooted in a closed system of subordination with no political support among the power-based political movements break that closed system apart? Can we? Can it? And then doesn't it make sense what right-wing women do?
So
we are one minute behind. Any questions? No, bye, thank you.
Yeah, goodbye. Unfortunately, no time for discussion right now, but hopefully you all will go to the breakout room. I think there's a link in the chat. It's been put in the Q&A area as well. Yeah, thank you all for being here. And I hope that our presentation was something that Andrea Dworkin herself would have appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening. Again, I'm sorry that it was so tight. I'm sure there are questions, and there are many reasons to discuss like points of the book. Maybe some other time.